Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Random Dude Analyzes the Patriots. I've had another channel for quite a long time. I've decided to start a sports channel. You know, I was gonna wait till I could make the appearance professional and look half decent, but I decided you gotta start somewhere. And if I don't start with this, I'm not gonna start. So, this channel's for talking about the Patriots. Been a Patriots fan since about, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I started kind of rooting for them in the '90s during the Drew Bledsoe era. It was really my cousin's team more so. I didn't have a team because growing up I lived in LA, and I rooted for the Raiders when I was a kid in high school. The LA Raiders. I barely cared that much about the Raiders or the Rams, but they went to the playoffs against Buffalo in those '90s years, and you know I got sucked up into the hype of rooting for them because everybody around me was rooting for them. And in the years with Rocket Ishmael and James Jett, Hostetler, Tim Brown, great wide receivers. I forget who their running back was, but yeah, that was my first fandom. But it didn't last very long. I think I rooted for them. You know, they played in the Coliseum. I had no interest in going there, and then they got pretty well beat by the Bills. Bills were always a better team in the '90s. Unfortunately, the Bills would then march right to the Super Bowl to get beat by the Cowboys, as we all know. Uh, and so three of their Super Bowl losses was the Cowboys. One was to the Giants. Curse Norwood curse. But anyway, so yeah, I rooted for the Bills in those Super Bowls just because I hated the Cowboys. You know, I thought the Bills were kind of an alright team. They had the blue and I liked the colors. The Bills was cool. You know, they had Thurman Thomas then. They had Andre Reed and Jim Kelly, who was fun to watch. So was Marv Levy was a good coach. They never got over the hump. I was never a Bills fan, but I rooted for them in those Super Bowls because I hated the Cowboys, and over again, it was a disappointment. Um, but I was a Raider fan in high school in California, and they left. I think in '96. That must have been. I think it was '96. They moved up to Oakland. So I was 16 years old, and they moved away, and I swore off the Raiders at that point. I was like, well, the Raiders abandoned us for Oakland. Now I know people who always tell me, well, you know, they were originally in Oakland. Yeah, I know they were originally in Oakland. Then they abandoned Oakland for LA. Then they abandoned LA for Oakland. Mark Davis is an idiot. I hate that freaking guy. Doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Hold on a second. Let me blow my nose here. This is a real good way to get this started. I said we were starting off. I said I was starting off rough, you know. So with the blowing nose, I'm honest. This first video. Hopefully this gets a lot better because I don't know how many people are going to stay watching me blow my nose and talk about how I was a Raider fan in high school. But anyway, so yeah, they left. I didn't give a crap about the Raiders, and I was never really a fan of the Rams particularly. I liked them a little bit. I also watched the Rams during that era during Isaac Bruce, Jerome Bettis. Isaac Bruce was only in the team for like the very last year. It was before Kurt Warner. And they had terrible Jim Everett. They called Jim Rome called Chris Everett, Chrissy or whatever. That was funny. Um, Now the Rams sucked by the '90s. They left too. They left for St. Louis. So living in LA after both the teams had moved away, I did not have a team to root for, and I kind of went teamless for a while. At one point, I thought about rooting for the Jets because um, I liked the green and white, and I liked the jet. And when I was a kid, I was always into being a pilot. Thought I wanted to be a pilot, so I was really into jets. But I think I'd almost decided to make them the Jets my team. Also, um, I used to like going to New York City, and as a kid, I'd been there a bunch of times. I thought it'd be cool to root for a New York team, but thank God I didn't go there. I think it was like maybe a year after, or not a year, but like for the first season where I thought maybe I'll be a Jets fan. All of a sudden, I heard a news story about how the greedy Jets owner was an asshole and wanted to have the stadium pay for his team to get it. I don't know if it was like he was trying to get a free stadium out of them or something like that, but We just a report said that the Jets owner was a total asshole, and I was like, you know what, I can't root for a team. I've always been very uh, anti really most of the owners. The owners are all for the most part rich d bags, except for Robert Kraft, who is rich. It doesn't seem like as much of a d bag, but apparently I'd heard that the Jets owner was especially notorious. So and just they had some quote that pissed me off that he said it made him seem like out of touch rich d bag. So I decided, nah, I'm not going to be a Jets fan either. I didn't really have a team from like 96 to 2000, I didn't really have a team. I mean, my cousin was into the Patriots, and he was sort of like trying to rally me into the Patriots. He said, you got to watch Drew Bledsoe. It's like he had been a Patriots fan since the 80s. Probably not a hardcore fan, but he'd always rooted for them. I think he said he went to see a game with Drew Bledsoe versus the Dolphins, Pats versus Dolphins, when Marino was still playing. And he watched some like great catch in the bar, and everybody went nuts. And that was like what solidified him as a Patriots fan. I think that was in the '80s. So, so he was a huge fan, and I didn't really have a team for a while. And I started hanging out with my cousin a lot, and I figured, well, I didn't really have a team, and I was basically I grew up in Massachusetts, Georgia. I was raised. It's the first place I remember living. I was born in Utica, New York, but I was only there for a year, and as a baby, I have absolutely no recollection of it whatsoever. And then we moved to Western Massachusetts, and this is the first place I know. I've had all my best years in Western Massachusetts as a little kid. It's fantastic. Um, and I had no idea about the Patriots as a little kid at all. My parents were not fans of the Patriots whatsoever. My parents didn't watch football at all. But I moved to Southern California when I was about, my family moved to Southern California when I was about 8, and life sucked for me in Southern California. I was a sort of a square peg in a round hole out there. So all the best years of my life were right here in Western Massachusetts. I ended up coming back. I am back in Massachusetts now, and so I always had that. That was always a connection in my mind, even though I was living in California. And because my cousin had moved out to California, and I started to hang out with him regularly, he's sort of a close. I've always been close with him. When he moved out, I started hanging out with him a lot more. And since he was a big Patriots fan, I didn't really have a team. I started rooting for them. I know it's going to sound bad. In 2000, about 2000 or so. And by 2001, they'd beaten the Rams, and that kind of solidified. I wasn't a fan of the Rams. I actually actively hated the Rams because, I didn't like Georgia Frontiere, and they left Southern California, as I mentioned. I was not excited about them leaving. So, I was hard rooting for the Patriots hard in that Super Bowl because the Rams had already won one, and I'd already resolutely decided I was not a Rams fan, and the Tom Brady story was just intriguing. This guy that nobody had heard of, some backup quarterback that was going to take over. It ended up being a hell of a story. 199th pick. No one would have saw that coming. And that was the beginning of my Patriots fandom. For the most part, that was the serious beginning when they beat the Rams in that Super Bowl. I had watched games that year and the previous year, but I think I really became a fan after that first Super Bowl. Now, at the time, I had no idea they were going to run off and become the greatest dynasty of all time. And no one's going to take me seriously. Any real Patriots fan's going to be like, "Oh, you idiot! You came around after the dynasty, you bandwagoner." They talk crap about us guys that came in late all the time. I understand why. They put in a lot of years with a really crap team. So I understand why they're bitter that some Johnny Come Latelys jumped on and bandwagoned. And I personally, I've always hated bandwagon fans myself. When Cowboys were America's team in the '90s, like I said, I was rooting for the Bills all those Super Bowls. I didn't I wasn't interested in the lure of that. Any team from Dallas, especially, because I'm not a fan of the South. So, you know, it's not like I've been a bandwagoner in the past particularly, but um, I really got into watching the Brady Patriots as anyone would, and since I had my roots in, I'm not just like any old bandwagoner because it's not like it's just totally unrelated to me because I do have these Massachusetts roots that I was talking about. This is the place where it felt the most like home to me, where I felt the most had the best years of my life, and I never didn't even have I didn't really have a Massachusetts team to root for. I grew up a Lakers fan in Southern California. So I sure as hell wasn't going to end up being a Celtics fan. Now it's like if the Celtics do well, I'm happy for them, but I wouldn't call myself a Celtics fan. I have a friend who's hardcore on the Celtics. Um, I don't watch hockey, so I could give less of a crap about the Bruins. And the Red Sox. I mean, I was happy when they beat the Yankees because it'd been so long, and I was tired of the Yankees winning all the time. I'll root a little bit for the Red Sox, but again, it's not like something I'm not watching every Red Sox game. In fact, I don't even get the Red Sox games anymore because they asshole Comcast decided to kill the rights, so that sucks. But anyway, so I didn't, like I said, I kind of like semi root for the other Massachusetts teams just because out of loyalty to this place, but not really. The Patriots are the one team that I really. They're the only, as far as baseball is concerned, I'm mostly a Mets fan. My family going way back is we're Mets fans. In basketball, I'm still pretty much, I don't really have a team in basketball anymore. I kind of rooted for the Warriors, I got to be honest, when I lived in Northern California. I lived in Northern California when that dynasty happened, and I was kind of happy to see the Warriors go from being a totally irrelevant team throughout history to actually, being a dynasty. But I don't really care about the Warriors particularly. It was just a fun thing to watch. I don't really pay attention to basketball anymore. I used to love it. I used to like the Lakers and the Warriors, but I don't really. It's like now if the Knicks do anything, if the Knicks get in the playoffs, I watch the Knicks and root for them. But I guess all of this was just to say the Patriots are my football team. You can say what you want. I like to think I have a justification, and you can say I'm a bandwagoner. Essentially, I sort of am. But in my defense, um, moving to I've moved back to Massachusetts. I live in Massachusetts currently. This has always been the place that felt the most like home. Um, and you know, even though I didn't really become a fan until after the team had its period of stink. Um, After the dynasty was over, and near those the last 5 years or so, from 2019 to this year, there obviously wasn't much to write home about. And I said, well, since I was a dynasty fan, I'm going to stick to this team. I'm not going to jump to another team. This will always be my football team. This is my one New England team. And so I did. I still watched the games. I watched and rooted. I hoped that Bill Belichick you know, was not as washed up as he ended up being. I really rooted for Gerard Mayo to do well. That didn't happen at all. I sometimes wonder whether Mayo could have done anywhere near as good as, I know Mayo, there was a lot of reasons to think he wasn't a great coach, but you do wonder if he'd had the same overhaul that Vrabel had, whether or not um, he would have had more success, It's easy to say that Mayo just out and out sucked. I think what sucked about Mayo was, the team, especially near the end of that Charger game. That's when I knew Mayo was not the guy. It's like if they had just coasted through that year and done kind of okay and got a good pick, fine, But it was like there was just you could tell the team didn't care, and the players chipping about the fans. Was it Tavai? I was just I guess I could forgive Tavai now. He's on the team. He's not like a major part of the team as a linebacker, but it's like it seemed like Mayo didn't really have control of those guys. And it seemed like their draft was an absolute disaster with him at the helm. So I really do think that Mayo wasn't the right choice. Robert Kraft, he made a he bungled that up a little bit. He promised Mayo the job. I understand him wanting to promise Mayo the job. He was close with Mayo. Mayo was a good linebackers coach for a while. And I think he was sort of semi-defensive coordinator or something like that at one point. So I thought it was good. Mayo was a team leader, defensive captain. Seemed like a guy who might be a good coach. It didn't work out. After that first Bengals game with him, I really thought they had a chance, but no good. So it was a long, I suffered. I kept wearing this stuff out and about. I worked at the local co-op and wore my Patriot shirts, and I kept repping the team even through the dark times. Things have gotten better now. Drake May, a new future for the team. Drake May is still no Brady, obviously. You can't expect ever to root for Brady again. This is one of the hard things about being, people don't recognize that, being a fan through the dynasty means that you'll never, be satisfied the way you were previously. But, that goes for every New England fan, whether you came in before the dynasty or came in at the dynasty. We'll never have a team like that again, I love Drake May. I think he's going to be great. But he's not Tom Brady. And we'll see. We'll see. So far, I'm skeptical because he's had some chances for fourth quarter comebacks. Hasn't done it yet. You really like to have a quarterback who can put the team on his back when you're down and with about 2 minutes to go. That was the great thing about Brady. They played the Chiefs in that game, with Patrick Mahomes, the up-and-coming star. I went to a bar. I was visiting my sister in Austin at the time, and they had a Patriots bar in Austin that I went to. And I remember in that game when the Patriots got the ball back, 2 minutes left, everybody in the bar knew that Tom Brady was going to do it. It's just he'd done it too many times before. You could sense the excitement, and it's like that was such a luxury having a guy like that who you knew you could rely on in the most crucial times. Drake May is not there yet, and I wonder if it's something where is it in his DNA, or is it a matter that has to be in your DNA, or is it something you can learn? We're going to find out. We're going to see what Drake May can do in the fourth quarter. But that's where I stand now. Patriots fan, new team, very exciting. Only had to wait 5 years, which is not a long period. It's funny. It was long enough that everyone that was hating on the Patriots before has managed to mellow out. Maybe it's because they know we're not quite that other team, So the chances of us having another dynasty like that one are probably pretty slim. I'm actually kind of disappointed that. I mean, they did a pretty good job rebuilding the team. All the free agents that Vrabel picked up. Vrabel's obviously a better coach than Mayo. I don't think Vrabel is quite the strategy master that Bill was in his day. So we'll see. I mean, in that game, that 2019 playoff game, Vrabel outwitted Belichick, but seemed like a lot of former Belichick's kryptonite was always facing guys that had formerly been part of his staff because I think they knew exactly, how he ran things and they knew exactly how to counter it. So, it wasn't just Vrabel. I saw him face a lot of other former assistants and guys in his system, and more often than not, they knew how to get to him. So, but Vrabel, he seems like a pretty good coach. We'll see if if he has this. I know he's a defensive coach. When they hired Vrabel, I was kind of like going to be happy with it was either Vrabel or Ben Johnson. I thought Ben Johnson would be an exciting coach to hire because I like the idea of getting a top offensive mind for Drake May. But you obviously cannot complain about Vrabel at all. He's given us a fantastic year. 11-3 is beyond our wildest dreams to start. Only problem is there's a question of whether or not this is smoke and mirrors. But I'll get into the team this year later on. This is sort of an intro video. Just give you a little bit of background about me as a fan. It's good to be watching football that matters again, and I'm looking forward to an exciting finish to the season, and hopefully we do something in the playoffs besides just one and done, because I fear that might be the case. But I'll get onto that more on this season later. For now, this is just an intro. This is, you can call me Zegan. I have another channel, decided to start a sports channel, and shortly I will be making another video talking about the upcoming game this weekend. Right now it's December 21st, 2025, and we are approaching the Ravens game. So my next video will be about the Ravens game, but that's it. That's me as a fan. That's me in a nutshell. And I hope I can make videos that are worth watching here. We'll see. My opinions are not particularly, I'm not as skilled as some people. I don't know about all the, I read up a little bit about the techniques and the coverages and all things like that. But I'm not going to be a guy who is going to go in depth and tell you, I can sort of give you general ideas about what I think the team needs to do or what's the problems and the positives and the negatives. But wouldn't call myself a scholar of football. I almost played on my high school team as a kid, but I was recruited to play in my junior year, so I wasn't even a freshman when I started. My history teacher was also the football teacher, and they needed help on their offensive line. So I was going to be, I think, a right tackle. I think is what he had planned for me. But I only went to a couple of practices, and then because I was such a terrible student, I was going to have to get up at like 4 in the morning to get to practice because I had to go to summer school, and so they had the football practice I was going to have to go to was before summer school, and already my parents and a lot of family and friends were trying to keep me away from football because they knew it was such a brutal sport, and I was going to probably end up getting broken bones and pay for it for the rest of my life, shots to the head and all that. So I never became a football player, but I enjoyed the practices, and I think I could have been half decent as long as I was willing to sacrifice my body to it. Otherwise, I've only played flag football and backyard football, and I have a basic understanding of how all the plays work. I've been watching football long enough that I know a lot, but I don't really know offenses and defenses very well. A lot of the things I'll be commenting on will come from things I've read from forums where people know a lot more than I do. But, I think I carry some of my own viewpoint on things, so we'll see. See what you think. But that's me. I'm a Pats fan. Go Pats. And hope you enjoy whatever I have to put out on this channel here.